Before the internet, before smartphones, and before modern side hustles existed, Americans still found surprisingly creative ways to earn money. Some were smart, some were risky, and others were so strange they sound like myths today, but they were completely real. 1. Selling human hair, America's forgotten cash crop. One of the most unusual ways Americans made money was by selling their own hair, and yes, it was a real industry. In the 1800s and early 1900s, long, healthy hair wasn't just a beauty feature, it was literally a product with value. Wig makers, theater costume designers, and wealthy women who wanted fuller hairstyles created a strong demand for real human hair. At the time, artificial hairpieces weren't as convincing, and high-quality natural hair was considered a luxury material. For many poor families, especially in rural areas, hair became a hidden emergency fund. A young woman could grow her hair for years, keeping it clean and strong, knowing that one day she could cut it and sell it for quick cash. Some families even treated it like a plan: grow it long, then sell it when rent was due, when winter supplies were needed, or when medical bills appeared. Traveling hair buyers would sometimes go from town to town offering money on the spot, almost like merchants buying crops. Barbers also acted as middlemen, collecting hair from customers and reselling it to manufacturers. The longer and healthier the hair, the higher the price, meaning people with especially long hair could make a surprising amount of money in a single cut. What makes this hustle so strange is that it didn't require land, education, or tools. You didn't need a shop, a farm, or a business license. You just needed patience, time, and the ability to grow something valuable directly from your own body. For many Americans, selling hair was one of the few ways to make money when they had absolutely nothing else to sell. 2. Collecting and selling scrap metal, trash was cash. Long before recycling centers became normal, Americans were already making money by collecting metal scraps and selling them for profit. In growing cities, scrap was everywhere. Broken tools, rusted nails, old pipes, worn-out pans, damaged machinery parts, even abandoned wagon pieces. What most people saw as useless junk, others saw as opportunity. Scrap collectors would walk through neighborhoods, alleys, construction areas, and factory zones looking for anything made of iron, copper, brass, or steel. Copper was especially valuable, and even small pieces could add up fast. Some people used carts, wagons, or bicycles to carry heavy loads, while others made deals with local businesses to pick up leftover materials regularly. Once collected, the metal would be sold to junk dealers or small foundries that melted it down and reused it. This was a real hustle because America was constantly building railroads, factories, bridges, and homes. Metal was always in demand, and recycling it was cheaper than producing everything from scratch. For poor workers, immigrants, and unemployed men during hard times, scrap collecting became one of the easiest ways to make daily cash. It was dirty work, physically exhausting, and sometimes dangerous, but it required no education, no tools, and no permission. You could start with nothing and still make money the same day. 3. Selling old rags and cloth, the rag trade. This is one of the most forgotten hustles in American history. People used to make money by collecting and selling old rags. In the 1800s and early 1900s, fabric was expensive, and nothing was wasted. Torn clothes, worn-out blankets, and dirty scraps of cloth were not considered trash, they were raw material. Rag collectors, often called ragmen, would go door to door offering small amounts of money for old cloth. Sometimes they traded instead of paying cash, offering cheap household goods like pins, needles, soap, or small tools in exchange for bundles of rags. Families would save their worn fabric for months just to sell it when the ragman came through town. So why were rags valuable? Because they were used to make paper. Before modern wood pulp paper became dominant, many paper mills relied heavily on cloth fibers to produce stronger paper. Old cotton and linen rags could be shredded, processed, and turned into books, newspapers, packaging, and official documents. This created an entire hidden economy where poor people could survive by collecting cloth from wealthier neighborhoods and reselling it to dealers. It wasn't glamorous, and it wasn't clean, but it was steady. In a time when jobs were scarce, selling rags was one of the simplest ways to turn everyday waste into money. 4. Selling bottles, glass was worth money. Before plastic took over everything, glass bottles were everywhere and they weren't meant to be thrown away. In many American cities, people made money by collecting empty bottles from streets, saloons, alleys, and trash piles, then selling them back to shops or bottle dealers. Some businesses even paid deposits, meaning bottles had real cash value built into them. Kids and poor workers would roam around looking for beer bottles, soda bottles, medicine bottles, and milk bottles. The more you collected, the more you earned. It was basically an early version of recycling, but done entirely by hustlers who knew that what looked like garbage was actually inventory. Bottles were cleaned, reused, or melted down, and because producing glass was expensive, reusing bottles saved businesses money. If you were quick and knew the right places, like outside bars or behind restaurants, you could make decent money in a single day. 5. Selling newspapers on the street, newsboys. One of the most iconic hustles in old America was selling newspapers. Boys, and sometimes girls, would buy stacks of newspapers for a small price and then resell them at a profit on busy corners, near train stations, and outside factories. The faster you sold them, the more you earned. This wasn't a normal job with a boss or a paycheck. It was pure hustle. If you didn't sell your papers, you didn't eat. Newsboys learned sales skills early. Shouting headlines, creating urgency, exaggerating stories, and grabbing attention in crowded streets. Big events like crimes, elections, or disasters were paydays because everyone wanted the latest news. Some kids became surprisingly good at it, even hiring other boys or controlling certain corners. It was harsh, competitive, and sometimes dangerous, but it was one of the quickest ways for young Americans to turn effort into cash. 6. Catching and selling leeches, yes, real leeches. This one sounds insane today, but it was real. People made money catching leeches and selling them to doctors. In the 1800s, leeches were widely used in medicine because bloodletting was considered a legitimate treatment for many illnesses. Poor Americans living near ponds, marshes, and slow-moving rivers would collect leeches by wading into water and letting the leeches attach to their legs. Then they'd carefully remove them and store them in containers. The more you caught, the more you could sell. Doctors and pharmacies bought them because demand was high. It was a disgusting hustle, but it required no tools, no land, and no training, just the stomach to do it. For desperate people, leech hunting was literally turning pain into profit. 7. Selling used cooking grease and fat, kitchen waste equals real cash. One of the dirtiest but most profitable forgotten hustles in America was collecting and selling leftover cooking grease. In the 1800s and early 1900s, nothing in the kitchen went to waste, not even the fat left behind after cooking meat. What most people today would throw away down the drain was once considered valuable raw material. Families saved bacon grease, beef tallow, and animal fat in jars or metal tins. When enough was collected, it could be sold to local soap makers, candle makers, and small factories. Soap back then wasn't a cheap product you bought in colorful packages. It was often made locally, and animal fat was one of the main ingredients. The same thing applied to candles, which were essential for lighting homes before electricity became common. Some people turned this into a regular side hustle by going door to door asking households, butcher shops, and restaurants for their leftover grease. They would carry buckets or barrels, collecting whatever they could. It smelled horrible, the work was messy, and it was easy to get sick if you handled it wrong. But it was consistent, because every home cooked, and every butcher produced scraps. During hard times, especially in crowded cities, this hustle became surprisingly common. If you knew a soap maker or a candle factory that paid reliably, grease collecting could become steady income. It was one of those invisible street economies that kept poor families alive, because even the waste of richer people could be turned into money.